Star Trek failed Jean-Luc Picard by giving him the same movie story as Kirk. For decades, Jean-Luc Picard has stood as one of Star Trek's most distinctive captains. Where James T. Kirk thrived on instinct, charisma, and bold recklessness, Picard was the embodiment of diplomacy, moral certainty, and cerebral leadership. He was not the man to grab the controls and charge into danger on a whim. Yet, when the Star Trek films attempted to transition Picard from the quiet authority of the next generation to cinematic heroics, they stumbled in the most telling way. By giving him essentially the same story they had already given Kirk. Consider Kirk's cinematic journey in the original film series. From Star Trek, the motion picture through Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Kirk faced existential threats, wrestled with personal grief, and ultimately had to prove his worth in the crucible of dramatic spectacle. His arcs leaned heavily into action, personal vendetta, and the classic hero's journey. He was thrust into situations that demanded daring improvisation, dramatic speeches, and split-second decisions. In short, Kirk's cinematic life was a story of externalized heroism. Picard, by contrast, had a different strength entirely. On television, he was defined not by how he acted in battle, but by how he thought, how he mediated, and how he carried the moral weight of the Federation on his shoulders. His victories were won in council chambers, science labs, and across philosophical debates, not in shuttlecraft dogfights or adrenaline-charged confrontations. Audiences watched Picard command with wisdom, not instinct. His tension came from ethical dilemmas, interstellar diplomacy, and the careful weighing of consequences. He was a captain of intellect as much as action. And yet, when the films took him to the big screen, they gave him Kirk's story. Star Trek. Generations cast Picard into a narrative echoing Kirk's trajectory, facing an all-powerful villain, wrestling with the death of a colleague, confronting a dangerous, high-stakes threat to multiple worlds, and ultimately relying on courage and bravado to save the day. Star Trek. Nemesis continued the trend. A personal vendetta against a singular villain, a climactic action showdown, and a focus on individual heroism over collaborative problem-solving. In both films, Picard was asked to be Kirk, stoic only in appearance, but narratively identical. This repetition fundamentally undermined what made Picard unique. A television captain known for thinking his way out of problems became a cinematic action hero who solved them with explosions and duels. The nuance that defined Picard's moral authority, the slow, measured approach, the weight of ethical consideration, was sidelined in favor of plot beats that audiences had already seen with Kirk decades earlier. Essentially, the films told the Star Trek universe, your unique captain is interesting, but only if he behaves like the old captain you already know. The result was twofold. First, Picard's cinematic stories felt predictable. Fans could anticipate the beats. A villain surfaces. Picard hesitates or strategizes. Action escalates. Picard triumphs heroically. There was no intellectual novelty, no moral quandary that couldn't be resolved with a flashy plot device. Second, it diminished the character's legacy. Picard, the man who had spent 7 seasons teaching the galaxy about diplomacy, empathy, and leadership, suddenly seemed like a re-skinned Kirk, his uniqueness stripped in service of spectacle. It's worth imagining what a truly Picard-centric movie might have looked like. Picture a story that leaned into negotiation, subtle strategy, or interstellar diplomacy gone awry. A plot in which Picard must prevent war through intellect, navigating treacherous political waters rather than slugging it out in a space battle. One where the stakes are measured not in explosions but in moral consequence, where the tension comes from the risk of ethical failure rather than physical peril. Such a story would have amplified the very qualities that made audiences fall in love with Picard in the first place. Instead, the films doubled down on external action because the studio likely assumed that movie audiences wanted the same thrill ride that Kirk delivered. But that assumption ignored what Star Trek's magic had always been. Exploration, not only of space, but of ideas, of morality, of what it means to lead. Picard didn't need to punch, duel, or narrowly escape destruction. He needed to think, to reason, to embody the moral compass the franchise promised. The failure of Picard's film serves as a cautionary tale about the danger of cinematic formula. When you transplant a character built for one medium into another, you cannot simply recycle someone else's story. Picard's genius lay in his difference from Kirk, and by erasing that difference, the films robbed audiences of a richer, deeper narrative. It's a loss that lingers, making modern projects like Star Trek, Picard not just nostalgic exercises, but crucial attempts to restore a captain to the storytelling mode he was born to command.